otherwise.
Yes. So yesterday we were learning this Gemara about the bowings that a person does during Shemona Esrei, and is it ever permissible to bow additional times, or is it inappropriate? And we mentioned that the holier, the greater a person is, the more he needs to show his humility before Hashem. And therefore, a Kohen Gadol or a king, they have an obligation to bow more than the regular individual. Different opinions exactly how much they had to bow. According to one opinion, the king, the whole Shemona Esrei, he was standing in a bowed position. I don't know how that affected his back, but he had to, the full entire Shemona Esrei, he was in that position of bowing. And in the...
while he's holding the Sefer Torah.
Oh, that's another story. Was he holding it even when he davened Shemona Esrei?
I don't know. I wasn't there.
Yeah, I don't know if he would be holding it then. That it was with him, but I don't know if that means he held it. That's a good question. We have to look into that. How, to what extent, did the king have the Sefer Torah? Especially because in davening, you're normally not allowed to hold anything. But in any event, however it was, bowing down the entire Shemona Esrei, according to Rabbi Yitzchak bar Nachmani, that's how the king was supposed to do his Shemona Esrei. Because he had so much power, he needed to have more humility. And which is interesting, because when we bow, it actually is like showing off that we think that we're important, like a king. But the king, the purpose of his bow is actually to be more humble, at least before Hashem. So then the Gemara jumped into the concept of bowing in general, and it talked about the bowing of nefilas apayim, which is tachanun. It talked about falling on one's face, and it told us there's three ways of doing it. There's kida, there is kriya, and there is hishtachava. Three words that are used for bowing, and they're all bowing on a person's face. And one is from a standing position, and the other is from a kneeling position, and the final one is from a horizontal, stretched out position of bowing on the ground. And the thing is that one of the interesting, I would say, pretty unknown and not such a well-known part of the davening is called the tachanun part, the prayer that we do after the Shemona Esrei. And the fact is, it used to be done differently than we do it now. It's a little unclear what the reason is, why it was done differently. I know Ezra mentioned yesterday that it has something to do with the fact that Christianity does things certain way and we want it to be different. I didn't see that explanation from the research that I did, but I don't question it. I'm sure there must be some source. It definitely is an area where it's not such a well-known area, this whole concept of why did it change. But it seems like in the olden days, they would do a much different tachanun. In fact, there is a chapter of Psalms that used to be said, and in most communities, in that chapter of Psalms is chapter 25. Chapter 25 of Psalms, it must be a very powerful chapter because the chapter, in most communities, they will not recite this chapter. Believe it or not, in the Chabad Siddur, we say this chapter. but in most Siddurim, and I believe maybe some Sephardic, in certain Sephardic groups, maybe they also do chapter 25. LeDavid Elecha Hashem Nafshi Esa. To David, a psalm to David, to you, Hashem, I lift my soul. It's a very powerful prayer. And it does say in the introduction to this psalm that if a person says it every day, he will not face hell. So that definitely is a very powerful psalm. Of course, all psalms are very powerful, but this one, for some reason, this was the usual psalm that was recited, and many communities stopped reciting it for the Tachanun, and instead they recite Psalm number 6, which is also a very powerful a psalm in about healing. Hashem, don't with your anger, don't rebuke me, and with your fury, don't punish me. Yes, Susan.
You know when that change was made? Do you know?
I don't, but I believe maybe in the time of the Goinim, in the time of the I mean, it is right. It's something is brought in the tour. So yeah, it probably was in the time of the Goinim. I should just look it up. It's in chapter, I think it's 131 of the Shulchan Aruch, chapter 131, and they don't really go through clearly what why it changed, but it does say that a person
isn't that. Don't you think that's a big deal for them to change from one psalm to another?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a big deal because we don't just easily switch things.
Right, exactly.
In Judaism. It does say over here, it does mention from the Goinim, Rav Neitrainai, who was one of the Goinim, and it does mention the Rambam's statement, but obviously the Rambam was way after this was changed. So he just says you lean on your Yatemaat, you lean a little bit, and while you're sitting, and
is that leaning to the right or the left?
So there's a discussion if it should be on your right arm or on your left arm, and turns out that the men, we normally would do it on our left arm, but because our tefillin in the morning is on our left arm, we lean on our right arm.
Okay.
But really it would be on the left. And then it does mention here that Rav Neitrainai, which was one of the Goinim, which means he came right after the end of the completion of the Talmud, in that era. So he writes that you have to be careful, not to bow fully to the ground. It shouldn't look like you're bowing to the, well, it's unclear if that's the reason, but he says you shouldn't fully bow to the ground. And in Ashkenaz, the minhag is to turn to the right, and they bring our Gemara about Abai and Rava, that they would lean to their side. They didn't want to. They didn't do the full bowing down. And even though that bowing down, the only prohibition is on the on a floor, and nevertheless, even without spreading out their hands, it's still considered prohibited rabbinically, and therefore Abai and Rava. So in other words, it touches upon this story that we read about Abai and Rava not wanting to do the full bow. And Rav Amram, who's also one of the Goinim, he says, everyone, you fall on, he uses the term, they fall on their face and they ask mercy. I'm just reading for you from the Torah, which is one of the codifiers, but and he brings down a lot of the prayers, a lot of the it brings down Rebbein Kol Lamim Master of the universe, have mercy on us, and so on. And what are we? What is our life? What is what is our value? Everyone is like nothing before you, and so on, which we say in some of the prayers. Now, it is interesting that it does consider this nefilas apayim something that you're not obligated to do. It was only like a option. It was like optional. Very interesting. And that's why you find in many Hasidic synagogues, any excuse not to do tachnun, they'll say, oh, today is the yahrzeit of someone. We're not saying tachnun. And all of a sudden, they skip the 3 pages of tachnun. But not everyone goes for that. A lot of Ashkenazic shuls don't do that. And even Lubavitch shuls, they don't generally rely on any yahrzeit. So yahrzeit, okay, no, they don't do that. But there are shuls that do. Any excuse, they'll say, there's a joke that there was a shul that used to use any excuse that someone's yahrzeit or someone's birth, some great rabbi's birth, they didn't say tachnun. So then there was one day that they didn't have any excuse for it. They said, oh, this is the only day that we don't have an excuse. That itself is a reason not to say the tachnun, because this is a unique day. Anyway, Ezra, yes, what did you want to say, Ezra?
So the David is said every single day, according to the Nusach, Eidot HaMizrach. And it's said after the Shlosheh Midot.
Yeah, Eidot HaMizrach, is that one type of Sephardic, or is that all the Sephardic groups?
I think it's all of them.
All of them? Okay, well, Lubavitch also says it, but I will tell you that in Ashkenazic Sidurim, they do not say the LeDavid Eilecha Hashem Nafshi Yasa. They say Psalm number 6, Hashem Al B'Yabchos Echecheni. So it was changed, but it used to be that Psalm. So it is very interesting how it switched, how things changed. And the source that I saw, explanation that I saw given, has to do with the fact that there is a Kabbalistic reason. It's based on the Zohar saying something to do with being a very dangerous if a person doesn't have the right intent when he says it. If he does have the right intent, it actually forgives him for all his sins. But woe unto him who comes to appease his creator with a distant heart, unwillingly.
But isn't that true to anything that you do?
But it seems like it's specifically talking about, I don't know the Zohar, but it seems like the Zohar is specifically talking about this nefilas apayim, when a person falls on their face. And it mentions there, and this causes him to depart from the world before his time, during a period when this tree is awakened into this world to exact punishment. And what that means is that really, during the Shemona Esrei, he's connected to the tree of life. After he finished, because he's connected close to Hashem, he's one with Hashem. After the Shemona Esrei, he's now connecting with the tree of death, Eitz Hadas, and he's now connected to the tree of death, and he's supposed to try to elevate and uplift the holiness that's trapped, that's stuck, the sparks that are stuck into the tree of death, because he's coming from such a high level. So he's supposed to try to elevate those sparks, and after a person should visualize this feeling of giving up his life in order to uplift the holiness trapped within the tree of death. So the Zohar then says it must be with the intention of the heart, and then Hashem has mercy on him and he forgives his sins. But then it says the opposite if he doesn't do this properly. It comes out that the rabbis said because of this we have to we have to be careful not to do the full extent of the prostrating oneself. So instead, we just lower our head and lean to one side, cover one's face, and it's like an aspect of Nefilas Apayim, but it's not the full thing. Now, this goes together with the fact that it's not a full obligation to say it. So Susan asked, how do we switch things around? The answer really is that Nefilas Apayim was never a full-fledged obligation. It was always called a Brochos. It was a optional prayer, which actually gives us a little understanding of why some shuls they are so lenient with it, just to say we're not saying it today, because it is a reshus. It was an optional prayer, but it is interesting how it in a certain sense it did have good mazel that it's not like Tikkun Chatzos, that's also an optional prayer, and no, hardly anyone says it. It is a common part of the Siddur. It is normally said under normal circumstances. Let's see, Ben, yes, Ben?
Yeah, I wanted to say, as far as I know, like Kida is not a very low bow. Kida, I looked in the dictionary now too, it says curtsy or bow. Now that tells me it's like when we bow for modim, you bow down. But kriya, you're going down lower, maybe on your feet and hands.
So the Gemara has a different translation.
And ishtachave is when you're flat down on the ground.
Right. But you have to understand that modern Hebrew is not always the same as the Talmudic Hebrew, how it's explaining the verses. So here we're explaining the verse.
They take it off from the Bible. Most of the words that are in the Bible and are in the dictionary, it's a translation to the word in the Bible.
Well, you might want to send them our Gemara. Make a copy and send it to the publisher. All right. So in any event, I should mention one other thing, and that is that there are other points that they mention, and that is something that we touched upon yesterday, that there is a verse in the Torah, it says, Even Maskis, that when there's a flooring stone, in other words, when you have marble or stone, that your floor is made of stone, you're not allowed to bow on it. And that's what we mentioned, that only in the Beis Hamikdash that would be allowed. But in a shul, if there's ever a stone, they put a cover. You have to cover before you bow, because a person's not allowed to bow on stone. So some want to say this is the reason that maybe the Nefilas Apayim Tachnun changed, was because of this reason as well, that we're afraid someone's going to end up bowing on the floor that's made of stone. And then that's one thing. Another thing is that it says that which we'll see, is that a person shouldn't do it in public unless they are sure that they will be answered, that their prayers are always answered. And because of that as well, we don't do it because of that concern. So some want to say that maybe that's connected to why it changed, because there are limitations when you're allowed to do the Nefilas Apayim, this falling on one's face. And so some want to say that maybe because of these limitations, they said better let's just not do it. Anyway, you want to look into it. It's definitely a subject that maybe hasn't been I don't think it's been dealt with that much. You might but you might find something. It's interesting. It's not such a well-known topic. In any event, let's continue a little further. So we did this statement, the 3 types of bowings, and thank you, Ben, for looking it up. I do appreciate that. I'm just sharing with you. The Gemara doesn't seem to fit with it.
Okay.
What can we do? I'd rather throw, if we're gonna take one of the explanations, we have the Gemara, not the dictionary. Definitely, this is the authentic source. So kida, the Gemara says, means on a person's face. Kriya is connected to the person's kneeling, and hishtachava, bowing, is connected to a person's spreading out their hands and their feet. I'm just thinking, Ezra, maybe I think what you were saying might be connected to the kneeling part, that there might be a reason Jews don't kneel has something to do with idol worship. And maybe that's, I think that's what you were referring to, specifically that type of
No,
bowing.
I was saying about raising the hands up because of that was what I had mentioned.
Oh, that raising the hands is the way the goyim.
Yeah, because if you look at any channel in which they have their whatever it is, they're always raising their hands up, whatever, and differentiate between us and them. I think we a long time ago we may have been told not to do that anymore. Oh,
that's very interesting. I'm sorry I misquoted you before. And that's an interesting thought. I'm not aware of that. Anyone else hear anything about like that, about not lifting our hands? I have seen certain people who are very into their prayers sometimes in shul go like this, but I don't know if it could be that it's wrong. It's definitely not a common thing. You don't see it that often. But maybe that's wrong. Yeah, it could be. I'm not aware. I'm not aware of that, but it could be. It could very well be. Maybe someone wants to look into that online. That would be a nice thing for tomorrow. Yes, Susan.
One thing I have to say, that a temple is much more quiet than when you go to a church. A lot of them are very noisy when they're praying, and at least in my experience in the conservative temple that I was going to, it's very quiet, and everyone is doing what they're supposed to do and not getting all bent out of shape and dramatic. There's not so much drama, and maybe that's what Ezra was talking about, that putting, doing that action is a bit much in a temple, and that's why they stopped it.
Okay, maybe. Yeah, I'm just pulling something else up about kneeling here. It says that throughout the Bible, we find bowing and kneeling as part of prayer. And this was indeed the practice in the temple. There are several reasons, however, why we do not kneel when we worship today. And this is based on what we just learned. It says you should not install a kneeling stone in your land to bow upon it. Idol worshipers often placed a special stone before their idol, then used it to kneel upon while they prayed to their idols. And the above verse forbids prostrating oneself flat on the stone floor, even if you are worshiping Hashem. And our sages extended this even just to kneeling. So that would be the only exception, is kneeling in the Beis Hamikdash, in the temple, in the temple in Jerusalem. However, the code of law states that if you put an intervening substance, then it's permissible. And when it comes to daily prayers, however, we are concerned about transgressing this prohibition, and therefore do not kneel in prayer. And additionally, according to the Talmud, a person of holiness and stature is discouraged from kneeling in his prayers unless he is sure that his prayers will be answered. If such a person were to kneel in his prayers, and his prayers were not accepted, it would seem in the eyes of the masses that as if God was unfair and unjust. Well, truly it is just. We who cannot, we just can't understand Hashem's ways. So anyway, so that's that. Now about holding.
Rabbi, about kneeling.
Yes.
Last year when we were praying in the tent in the parking lot, the people would bring out mats and kneel on a mat, not to kneel on the stone on the parking lot stone, you know.
Wait, what are you saying? That
Last year, you
Yeah.
know, we were praying in the tent, not
Okay.
in the shul itself. The
Oh.
tent was in the parking lot.
Uh-huh.
So because it was the parking lot, we would bring out, not everybody, but some of the people would bring out a mat from the shul, a piece of shatia, you know,
Right. Uh-huh.
and bow on that, not on the
Uh-huh.
stone.
Oh, interesting. Because you're
Kneel,
saying
for
cement,
kneeling.
because
for
cement
kneeling.
is really stone. Or
Even the blacktop, it's stone.
it's stone. Tar is stone.
The
Yeah.
blacktop is just like a paint on top of the stone.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Interesting.
Yeah,
Right.
it's made-
It could
from
also be they
gravel.
don't want to ruin. They also didn't want to ruin their pants.
Yeah, probably.
So that's another thing.
Sometimes it
But-
was rain too, and it was wet, so.
Ah, right, right. Yeah. So anyway, I don't see much about raising our hands when praying.
No, they
So,
have, yeah, there's one thing that talks about not raising the hands, but the whole phenomenon of shackling. So,
Oh. Uh-huh.
yeah, so,
What is
anyway.
that?
Oh, you don't know
Shuckling
what-
means to shake a little when you're
Oh,
praying,
shake? Oh,
moving back and forth. Okay, in any event, let's continue in the Gemara. So we said the three types of bowing. Then we said Amar Rav Chia Berei de Rav Huna. Let's see where that is. We're going to start 10 lines, maybe 12 lines from the top of the page, 34b. So Rav Chia Berei de Rav Huna, Rav Chia, the son of Rav Huna, said, Chazina Lahula Abai Rava. I saw Abai and Rava, the Matzlu Atzluye, when they did the Nefilas Apayim, they did not spread out their hands and their feet. Rather, they would lie on their side. And the Matzlu Atzluye, they lied on their side. And it seems like they were concerned about the bowing on top of this stone that we're not allowed to do unless we're in the Beis Hamikdash. That's what it seems like. That's what they were concerned about. So they didn't want to do the regular Nefilas Apayim because they were concerned. Now, so maybe this is the source. Maybe this is from Abai and Rava that they didn't want to do it the regular way. But we don't even do it on our side. In other words, yeah, I guess we can't say this is the source because it seems like they did some of it. They did more of a bow than we do. That's what it seems like. Matzlu Atzluye.
Rebbe,
Yes.
looking at the Sefaria edition translation,
Yeah.
they said they write here. I saw Abaya and Rava who would lean their heads and not actually prostrate themselves on the ground. So they're interpreting Matzlu Atzloye as just leaning their heads. This would definitely be it.
So this would be the source then.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. Well, I wonder if the Steinsaltz says anything because they get their stuff from Steinsaltz. I think their translation is based on this. Susan, don't you have any commentary on this Abai and Rava's story?
yes, there's a bunch. Rava bowed in the blessing of Thanksgiving. There's notes on the side up the wazoo. A lot. I mean, they're the one.
All right.
They're talking about personalities. There's notes.
No, we don't want the personalities. We just want to know if it says anything about what exactly they did, how they did this. They lied on their side. What does that mean? That they lied on their side. They leaned on their side. Abaye and Rava.
There's a difference between Rava and the patriarchs. How they there was a difference in how they bowed.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah.
But the halash, there's a halash, but the halasha is all talks about focusing the heart. I mean, I don't know how to explain it without reading it. There's a lot. That's all I can tell you. I mean, on both sides.
Yeah.
On both sides.
Okay. Okay.
Big
guess,
explanation. I'll write a
after-
little paragraph and
Yeah.
give it to you
After the
tomorrow.
class, maybe for tomorrow, maybe we'll have
Correct.
a little
Rabbi,
insight from
the,
Rabbi Steinsaltz. What did you say?
The Steinsaltz basically said that they would incline themselves.
Right.
They wouldn't bow completely. They would just incline themselves. Like
Oh, okay. So you have Steinsaltz. You have the.
it's one of the side commentaries. If you just open up, you click on Steinsaltz, it'll give it to you in Hebrew.
Oh, interesting. Oh,
Thank
you can
you.
look on Sfaria for
That's
Steinsaltz. Oh,
Right.
Okay. So maybe this is the source. Then that would mean that it changed in the time of the Gemara. Then this is the source. Abai and Rava did it. I guess that would be the explanation. Okay, great. Thank you, Isaac.
Thank you, everybody.
So the Gemara then continues, and it talks about. It's a little confusing, but we mentioned that we bow in Moedim, the beginning and end of Moedim, which means that the beginning of the Shemona Esrei we bow twice, and at the end of Shemona Esrei we bow twice. The simple way of learning this Gemara is that the end of Shemona Esrei, when we bow at Moedim, do we really bow twice? Or maybe it's only once at Moedim. That's the thought. The simple way of reading it is, it seems like there was question about bowing twice at the end of Shemona Esrei. So the Gemara starts off like this. Tani Chada, we learned one brisa. Hakareya b'haidah hareza meshubach. A person who bows in haidah, this is praiseworthy. But Tanya Idach, what we learned in another brisa, hareza maguna, it's disgraceful. And the Gemara initially answers it like Hasha Habatchila B'Habasayif. There's not a question. This is in the beginning, and this is in the end. The beginning, when you bow, it's appropriate. When you bow at Moedim, because the word Moedim in this situation, in this paragraph, actually does mean to bow. Often it doesn't mean to bow, it means to give thanks. Here, the Moedim actually means to bow, and therefore it refers to bowing. Therefore, it's appropriate to bow at the beginning of Moedim. The end of Moedim, we do not, the Gemara's understanding now is you don't bow. It's a disgrace because it looks like you're showing off. You're doing more bows than you're supposed to. The Gemara then says, Rava kara b'haidah tchila v'sayf. Rava bowed in the haidah blessing in the beginning and in the end. So he did it twice. So that seems to contradict the answer that we just gave. And again, we were talking about a contradiction of bowing the beginning and in the end. And Rava, and we answered that there's a difference. We saw a contradiction of bowing in the Haidah, in the thanks part of the Shemona Esrei. And we answered it, there's a difference at the beginning and the end. And then we said Rava did it both, which seems to not fit with our answer. Amru Yilei Rabbanan, and the rabbis told Rava, they said, "My covered marhachi. Why is master doing this? You're not supposed to. You do it once." Amar lahu. Rava answered to them, "Chazina l'Rav Nachman dekara." I saw Rav Nachman bowed, and in the beginning and the end, he bowed this way. So I'm following him. Well, Chazina l'Rav Sheshis dekavad hachi, and I saw Rav Sheshis also. Therefore, I follow them. I'm doing like them. So this is the understanding that you're supposed to bow in the beginning and in the end, which ends up that seems like a problem. So what does that brisa mean when it says it's a disgrace to bow during Haidah? So we have to now re-enter that. We have to re-understand that brisa that says that it's a disgrace if you bow in Haidah in the praise part of the Shemona Esrei. V'hatanya kireh b'Haidah reisa maguna. The Gemara says, how did Rava and his teachers like Rav Nachman, Rav Sheshes, how did they do it? It says it's disgraceful. So the Gemara answers, Hahi b'haidah shebahalal. That's referring to the haidah, the praise that's in halal. When we say Haidul Hashem ki tov ki li'olam chasdoi, just today actually we said halal. So when we say Haidul Hashem ki tov ki li'olam chasdoi, you're not supposed to bow. They didn't establish, the rabbis didn't decree to bow, even though you're saying Haidu, we're thanking Hashem, but the rabbis didn't tell us to bow there. You're not supposed to bow there. You're supposed to say it regularly. If a person bows, it's a disgrace. So the Gemara says, that's what we're referring to, the Haidah of Halal. But we have a brisa that doesn't fit. V'hatanya hakireya b'Haidah uve'Haidah shel Halal. If a person bows in Haidah and in the Haidah of Halal, it's a disgrace. It says two Haidahs. If you bow in two Haidahs, it's a disgrace. It must be the Haidah of Shemoneh Esrei and the Haidah of Halal. Probably means both of them. So because it says it twice, it says Haidah and Haidah of Halal. So it sounds like it's a disgrace. So how did Rava and Rav Nachman, Rav Sheshes, they all seem to bow twice? So the Gemara answers, no, we're not talking about the Shemoneh Esrei bowing. There's one other time when we say Haidah. Titanya, when did we learn that brisa about bowing is a disgrace? The Haidah de Brochos HaMazoin, in the Haidah of the benching, when you bench, you're not supposed to bow. When you say Noideh Lecha, we thank you, Hashem, you're not supposed to bow. And the reason is that the rabbis didn't tell us to bow in that place, and therefore it's not considered appropriate to do it. But in the Shemoneh Esrei, that's when you are supposed to bow twice, and that's what we are referring to in the beginning of Haidah, in the end. Now, there is another way of reading this Gemara, and that we're not really talking about the regular Moedim that we recite in the Shemoneh Esrei, but what we are talking about is the Moedim D'Rabbanan, the Moedim that they used to say when the Chazan repeats the Shemoneh Esrei, and you say a Moedim during that prayer. Are you supposed to bow in the beginning and in the end, or just in the beginning? And the conclusion from the Gemara would seem that you could bow both the beginning and the end, or either one. In other words, you could follow the view that you only bow once, the assumption of the Gemara, or the conclusion of the Gemara that you could bow twice. It's definitely not a disgrace if you want to bow at the end of that Moedim D'Rabbanan. That's what it seems like from our Gemara. So that's an interesting halacha, because most people only bow once in the Moedim that you say. According to this view, you would be allowed to bow twice, following Rava and Rav Sheshes, Rav Nachman, following their view. You would be able maybe to bow then at the end of that Moedim. I don't know. Nowadays, it might look a little arrogant if you do. I don't know anyone that does bow twice, but it does mention in Shulchan Aruch, Yesh Misha Omer shetzarech lishreis gam b'soif, that there are those that say you're supposed to bow also in the end. V'toiv lachosh l'dvarav, in Shulchan Aruch it says it's good to follow their words. V'yesh oimrim she'omer hakol b'shchia achas. And some say you say the whole thing with one v'chein haminhag, that you do the whole thing with a bow.
Rabbi?
That's very interesting. Let me just tell you, this is in chapter 127 of the Shulchan Aruch. Yes, Ezra.
So when you say the bracha and at the bracha after the modim, are you saying that this also now is another 2 times that we bow? So in other words, we bow 4 times?
Well, when the Chazan repeats the Shemoneh Esrei, you do bow in moedim, right? but it's not part of your Shemona Esrei. It's not part of your. You're not bowing as part of your Shemona Esrei now. You're finished your Shemona Esrei a while ago. You're now just listening to the Chazar Sashatz, and you're answering the few answers. And one of the answers that you answer is the Moedim, and at that Moedim you do bow. But what we're seeing here is that it seems like the custom is to bow the entire time. This is interesting. Most people I know, they just bow and lift up their head. Let's pull out a Shulchan Aruch here.
Normally, you just bow for the first.
What is that?
You bow until the first mention of Hashem's name in the Moedim.
Right. That's what I know of as the custom. But and it does mention such a custom, but it seems like in the Shulchan Aruch itself that they mention the custom of bowing the entire time. 1 second, let me pull out here. This is the last chapter of Chelek Aleph of the Mishnah Berurah, and let's just pull it up here. The laws of Moedim D'Rabbanan. This is, again, we're talking about the repetition of the Shemona Esrei, and when the Chazan gets up to Moedim, the community, the congregation bows. They also recite a paragraph. So it says they bow with the Shliach Tzibur, with the Chazan. They shouldn't bow Yoiser Midai, and they say the Moedim. Then give the whole and some say. The Beis Yosef, the Rabbi Yosef Kairei continues. He says some say that you have to bow also at the end, and it's good to follow their words. And then the Ramah says some say that you do the whole thing with one bow. Now, in the Bir Hagra, the Vilna Gaon says you don't have to bow only until you say until Atahu Hashem Elokeinu, and afterwards you get up. So I think that's what most people I know do. Let's see the Alter Rebbe. He brings the minhag is to bow the whole time. I don't know. Do any of you see people bowing the whole time? Moedim? I guess they say it so fast you don't really know.
I never saw anybody bow all the time.
The
They
whole
just
Moedim. No, that
bow
one
and-
paragraph.
In the repetition, after bowing, most people sit down immediately.
Right. In the repetition, the bowing, yeah.
Yeah,
Right. A lot of people don't even stand.
the Sephardic do stand.
Right. So in any event, this is interesting that the Ramah says B'chein haminhag. That's the minhag. Now in the Mishnah Berurah, he brings the Bach writes that you should stand a little when you say Hashem's name. In other words, move your head up a little, and then you can bow. But he says the community, the oilam, the nation follows what the Ramah says. That even though you're saying Hashem's name, normally we would put our head up when we say Hashem's name. Here you don't have to, because it's not actually a bracha, so you don't have to. Even though he mentions the Bach that says maybe you should lift your head up a little when you say Hashem's name, but in any event, that is. Well, let me pull the Alter Rebbe here. $127. So when the Chazan reaches Moedim, they bow with the they bow with him. When the Chazan reaches Moedim, the community bows with him, and even an individual who's davening should bow, as long as he's in a place where he's allowed to bow, not at the end of a bracha or the beginning. And everyone says Moedim, and some say that you finish Baruch Ato Hashem Kel Hoidois, and some say don't say the bracha at the end. So we don't say Hashem. We We just say Baruch Elohidois. We don't say Baruch Ato Hashem. Now, some say you have to also bow at the end. Al Sha'anu Maidim. And it's good to follow that. In these communities, the minhag is, these nations, the minhag is, in these countries, I should say, in these countries, the minhag is that we say the whole thing from the beginning to the end, bowing. Even though you have Hashem's name, it's not a problem because it's not the beginning or the end of a bracha, and it's not a problem. Interesting. I must say, this is new to me. It's not not what I normally see. I don't normally see people, bowing the entire Moedim, but you learn new things every day. Okay. Do we have a question, Susan? Do you have a question?
Yes. On one of the side notes, it says the bows of a king and a high priest.
That's on a previous.
My question is, who is considered a king nowadays and who is a high priest?
We don't have either of them nowadays.
We don't have either one, correct?
Correct. And anyone that claims to be one of those two, you have to send him to an institution.
Okay.
We are now going to start the Mishnah, then the final Mishnah of the chapter. Hamispalo, a person who davens, vita'a, and makes a mistake in their prayers. So we'll soon see what that means. But a person who davens and makes a mistake in their prayers, simin raloi, it's a bad sign for them. It looks like Hashem doesn't want their prayer. And Hashem doesn't like them. And v'im shliach tzibur, if he's a leader of the prayer, and he makes a mistake, simin ra l'shoylcha, it's a bad sign for those that sent him. Because when someone sends you to do something, you are like them. So if the congregation sends you to be their leader, to pray, to lead the service, you are their shliach. And if something goes wrong, it looks bad on them. It means that maybe they have certain sins, and it's a bad sign if you make a mistake. Yes, Susan.
Is this different from a few days ago when you lose your place? That's not a mistake. This is something entirely different.
So we're gonna see. You have to stay tuned.
Okay.
So Amru Olav al Rabbi Chanina ben Doisa. They said about Rabbi Chanina ben Doisa, Shahaya Mespalal ala Chaylim. He used to pray for sick people. And he would say, after he prayed, he would say, Zechai v'zemes. He would say, this one is going to live and this one's going to die. And Amrulai, so they asked him, how do you know? You know if your prayer is answered. How do you know? You got, like Hashem told you what the answer is? He asked for them, he begged Hashem. And how did he know? How would he? So it says, so he answered, Amar Lahem, he answered them, if my prayer is clear and it goes smoothly, I know
it's good.
I know that it was accepted. And the person's going to live. Vimlav, and if not, I know that it is, my prayer was torn up. It was confused. It was not accepted. And the person is going to die. My prayer was not accepted. And that is the Mishnah.
Interesting.
Rashi tells us there's two ways of reading Maturaf. Maturaf either goes on the person who's sick, or if it goes on the prayer. But either way, it means his prayer is not accepted.
Soldiers. Makes a mistake.
And
Can't even say it right.
and the prayer is not accepted, and the person's going to die. So now comes the Gemara. The Gemara asks where he made a mistake. It's a bad sign. That's what the Mishnah said. The Gemara says, "Ahai, on which bracha of the Shemona Esrei is it a bad sign if he makes a mistake?" So, ahai, on which? Amar Rav Chia bar Amar Rav Safra. It says in the name of Rav Safra, Mishum Chadvei Rebbe, in the name of one of the students of Rebbe, of base medrash of Rebbe. But Avos, if he made a mistake in the blessing of Avos, the first blessing of the Shemona Esrei, that's the one that if you make a mistake, it's a bad sign. It shows that there's something wrong. If you make a mistake in that bracha, it's a hint that something Hashem doesn't like your prayer. Ika Damasni la Abraisa, and some learned this statement that one of the students, the base medrash of Rebbe, said they learn it on the Brisa, not on the Mishnah. In other words, the way we just said it, it's on the Mishnah. The Mishnah said that's a bad sign. And the Gemara explains this statement from a student of Rebbe that he said it's referring to the bracha, the first bracha of Shemona Esrei, where we mentioned the patriarchs. That bracha, if you make a mistake in that bracha, it's a bad sign. But some say it on the Brisa. The Brisa says, person who prays, he has to have kavana, bekulan, in all the brachas. He can't have kavana, concentration, in all of the brachas. He should have in mind, he should have concentration, at least for one of the brachas. So on this, Amar Rav Safra, Mishum Chadvei Rebbe, Rav Chia said in the name of Rav Safra, and the name of one of the students of Rebbe, which one should you have that in concentration? In other words, you're not able, you have ADD, you can't concentrate for too long. So which bracha should you work on having the given the concentration? Otherwise, the first bracha of Shemona Esrei, where you mentioned the patriarchs, that one you should have the most you should have concentration. It's interesting because I think the easiest brachas to have concentration are the ones where you're asking for your needs. So this is like the opposite of what most people are able to concentrate. Now, it's very easy when you're thinking of a problem you have and you're dreaming of it, and then when you reach that in Shemona Esrei, of course, you have that in mind. But the avos is like the easiest bracha to not concentrate on, and this is the one that it says here is the most important. Not only is it the most important bracha to have concentration, but the earlier thing that we said, if you make a mistake in it, it's a bad sign. It also shows that this bracha is the very important bracha to concentrate on, that you wouldn't want to make any mistake in. Okay, Amar Olav al Rebbe Chanina. They said about Rebbe Chanina. This is Rebbe Chanina ben Doisa, and they said that he would tell you if the prayer was answered. Menahani Mili. How does he know that if it's smooth, if the prayer comes smooth? And Rashi tells us that it means if it goes from his heart to his lips without making any mistake, and it leaves his heart and it goes through his lips, whatever, and without any stuttering, so to speak, then it's considered a accepted prayer. So how does he know this? How do we know such a concept? So Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, says, because there's a pasuk. The pasuk says, "Boirei nivsfasayim." He creates the words of the mouth. Shalom, shalom, larochik ulakarov. Peace, peace for the person who's for the far and for the near. Amar Hashem, says Hashem, urafasiv, and I healed him. So Niv here, niv means dibur, speech. So how do we see here that if it goes smoothly, so it's when the speech of the lips is complete, you're guaranteed that there will be peace to everyone and there'll be healing. So Bayre Nivs Fasayim means when the speech of the lips is good, then it's Hashem heals. So that's how he sees it in the verse, that it means that it's so in other words, Bayre is from the word bari. That's what it seems like. Bari means when it's healthy, when the speech is healthy, when the speech is smooth, then it's shalom shalom rachuk karov and Amar Hashem refasiv, and I heal him. So the word Bayre comes from the word is the Gemara is translating it to mean bari. That's what it seems like Rashi is saying, that when the speech is bari, is going smooth, it's healthy, then you'll definitely have peace and you'll definitely have healing. So
here in Svaria, he says, the verse states, the Lord that creates the expression of the lips says, peace, peace to him that is far off, and to him that is near, I will heal him. It can be inferred from this verse that if the speech of the lips, fluent speech, is granted to one who prays, it indicates that his prayer on behalf of the ill has been accepted. So what he's saying is, Bayre the lips, the one who is Bayre the lips says, if you are near, I will heal him. So that the nearness, I guess, refers to the fluent speech. If you're far away, you got to stumble till you get there. But if it comes easily, then that's a sign that it will be accepted. It's just an inference. It's not a...
Yeah, but the Rashi seems to learn that it's from the word bari. If you look at Rashi seems niv bari ba'adam az muftach ala shalom. It seems pretty simple. I like Rashi's explanation. I don't hear you, Isaac. You're muted, Isaac. Isaac, you got muted.
When I go to the daf, it takes me off the controls from this. That the one who creates the lips is saying the one who is close to it. Where does Rashi? Rashi says different than bari is a lips. The one who created the lips.
Rashi says kishahaniv bari ba'adam. So it seems like he's translating Bayre to be bari. In other words, he's using the drush license to translate Bayre as bari.
Poetic license.
Yes. But I'm sure there are other pshatim. I just seems like this one is pretty smooth. Okay, let's see. Should we do one more little piece? All the prophets that they spoke, they are prophecies of good things that are going to happen. They prophesied for someone to marry their daughter to a Talmud Chacham, to a scholar, and to do business with a scholar. And by doing that, they will be able to learn Torah better. That they will merit to these good prophecies for these that, in other words, the prophecies were meant for the people who help out the scholars. They will merit these prophecies, these good prophecies. And even though they themselves maybe are not studying Torah, but because they're connected to a scholar and they're helping a scholar, they will benefit from the good prophecies. But the scholars themselves, for them,
Can't even talk about it.
the reward for them is unbelievable.